So very happy to be presenting a collector panel. We're going to be talking a little bit about what it means to collect art in the NFT space and hearing from three amazing speakers who all have, I think, very different experiences in collecting art NFTs. So I'm going to go ahead and actually ask them to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with you, Lex.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Lex, but on Twitter, people know me as NFT Girl. I started collecting back in late 2020, and over the last year, I've curated over 500 pieces. And my mission is to elevate artists and just help artists that are not in the NFT space learn about the space and teach them some of the lessons of the artists that have been extremely successful in the space. I'm a host in a show called The Joy of NFTs that I started on YouTube, and I also host Twitter Spaces with different artists and people from the Web3 and NFT community.
Thank you. Lauren?
I'm Lauren Selig. I'm mostly an investor in companies, and many of those companies sit and thrive around the NFT, gaming, and blockchain space. It's completely Colby's fault that if in any way I've collected NFTs, it's because of him, because many years ago he started pitching myself and somebody we know about what he was working on, and we all looked at him like he was crazy, and it turns out he wasn't. We just didn't catch on until a little later than he did. So personally, what I think is the most important thing about the NFT space and collecting it is making sure that those NFTs either have some form of utility or have inherent artistic value in and of themselves or represent significant IP. So I kind of try to bridge the gap between those different areas and support companies and people that help that happen.
Super. Colborne Bell, you may recognize me from earlier. I founded the Museum of Crypto Arts, and I, at the time, was looking for a visual language that would communicate some of the ideals and feelings that I was experiencing in the fast-moving world of cryptocurrency. So I generally look for a niche, or as Martin would perhaps say, not so niche aspect of the NFT art market, because I think, blockchain will be a larger seismic revolution than what the internet was, and I think there is kind of a unique culture being built among the hackers, builders, engineers that are kind of pioneering this movement.
Cool, thank you. I think you all briefly touched on it, but I think it would be nice for the audience to hear a little bit about the context of how and why you started collecting NFTs. So I'll start with you, Lex.
Yes. So I did not come from the traditional art world. I was business operations, running different startups, and my business partner was very much into crypto earlier on. And I actually come from a family that has a lot of artists. And even though I've always been more on the entrepreneurial side, I've always have a deep admiration for artists and just the creative world. So whenever we saw this wave of NFTs coming about, we both partnered together to start going into NFTs full-time, 100%. And it's such a rare opportunity because we had the people that believed in it, and we had the capital, and it was the right time, which is, I think, the hardest thing. Timing is super hard, and we started in the collection and curating and acquiring assets at the beginning or towards the end of 2020, which was where people, right now they say like NFT people are crazy. Back then it was like even more. So it was perfect timing, right? When people think that you're crazy, it's the perfect time to start acquiring things. So that's kind of where I started in the context. And and now my full life has changed in the course of a year, and I love it. I wouldn't have done anything different.
Talking about crazy people, Colburn, do you want to give some context of how you started collecting?
You know, really, we're talking crazy people. How did I start collecting? It doesn't like particularly matter, but what I really do believe in is parallel systems, right? And what I noticed was that in the same way that cryptocurrency had kind of created a parallel financial architecture to traditional finance, there was an opportunity here to create a parallel arts and culture movement and market to the traditional art world. And when you begin to kind of stack them side by side, there is a very clear pro and con weight. I was quite early, and the people that I were encountering had big ideas, powerful vision, and I was just very attracted to the philosophy of what they were prescribing and what could be. And in capitalism, we vote with our dollars. So I started collecting there.
When was that?
I bought, well, I mean, I was like an original Mooncat rescuer, if that counts. So that would have been like August of 2017. But like crypto art, what I came to know as crypto art, I bought my first piece in February of 2020.
And Lauren, I know you also come from more of a traditional like art collecting as well. So how was that, and how did that transition happen for you?
So from a very early age, I remember going with my parents to meet artists when they would buy pieces of their art. So I remember sitting in Robert Motherwell's backyard and on a swing watching him paint. And my father bought an original piece of the Eiffel Tower, which had utility to it because it was supposed to be actually part of the staircase, but they made it out of a material that was too heavy, so it would have made the Eiffel Tower fall over if they had used that continuously up through it. So they took it apart and sold it as pieces of art. So it went from utility to being a piece of art and had value still. So I thought about that, you know, when I was now much older, and how do you, because I work with a lot of story editors and writers and designers for movies and television shows. How do you turn that beautiful work that they're doing into something that has a different type of value in the NFT space? And so I started, you know, picking up on different NFTs that I thought had that value to them. And I also look very heavily at the gaming industry and the metaverse space. I invest and advise in several companies that I feel are incredible game changers in that world, and NFTs are a very big part of allowing people to play in and out of metaverses and consumer worlds, and brands are obviously picking up on that now too. So that's what I try to do.
Cool. I think you know, when we talk about like collecting NFTs, there's a lot of different areas and words that get, you know, talked about, like speculation, value, investment, ROI. And one thing that not a lot of people talk about is like passion, you know, and like you collect art because you want to support artists without necessarily always thinking about what comes out or what comes back. And I think here, you know, I'm joined by people who do. And so I just want to tap into that a little bit and go into the reason why you collect NFTs and what drives you towards certain artists and certain artworks.
So I'm definitely driven by passion, and I think the artist taught me that. I didn't know that. I come from a family where the artists in my family were always undiscovered. They never made it into mainstream. And I just thought that they were so talented, but they just didn't have the platform to showcase that, especially coming from a third world country. I'm originally from Venezuela. So the opportunities that other people and other artists have in different countries is completely different. And NFTs allow the opportunity for everyone to be on the same level, or at least to start on the same level, right? And when I started collecting and I saw the reaction of the artists, of like someone being in Bangladesh and seeing and saying, oh my gosh, like you changed, I cannot believe that I can make money selling my art. This has never happened before. It really touched me because I went back to thinking about those people in my family that could have done that, and I was just like kind of like a click of like, this is an amazing opportunity for any creator in the space to finally be able to live off of their work, and not only that, connect with the collectors immediately, right? There's no boundaries. Anybody can DM me on Twitter at any moment, and that's so powerful. So I think definitely I like to see that passion from the artists as well in their work, because obviously I want to invest in someone that believes in themselves and see themselves in the long run. But also just that reaction that I get from artists whenever you see that you're changing their lives, that's kind of an addicting feeling, and that's kind of one of the things that I want to keep doing. So that's something that drives me for sure.
Lauren?
I've definitely made some mistakes in NFTs that I bought because I'm like, somebody told me that looked cool and they'll have a lot of value later, and then you realize you not only didn't like it, but that wasn't the case, for sure. There are a lot of pieces of art that I'll buy because I really just love it, and I never would ever want to plan to sell it because it's just so nice to look at, or has a memory behind it, or there's something about the artist that touched me in some way. And so those are sort of the pieces that they're just never going to go anywhere. And then there's things that are kind of cool that you're buying that they somehow touch into sort of the gaming space, and they have these big Discord channels with loads of members, and you can kind of feel like you're part of a community. I'm pretty bad about that because I'm just not as technologically advanced as I would like to be to take advantage of those things. And then there's everything in between where you have artists that you really want to be able to support themselves or support others using what they're doing in their art space, and maybe that means that they go into the NFT space, or NFT artists that want to go into traditional art. There's a lot of back and forth in that area, and so I don't know, does that cover what you asked, basically?
Yeah, I actually want to touch, if I can, a little bit on the utility part that you mentioned, because I think because I think it's interesting to dig a little deeper in that. Maybe for people who are not aware, but what does it mean to collect something that has utility? Like, what is that utility, and how do you use it? Actually, like, how is it useful to you as a collector?
Well, if you think about some of the play-to-earn games, right? There are people in third world countries that are able to support their families using an NFT that has utility, to the point that there's even guilds where you can actually, and you probably all know this, you can rent those skins or those NFTs to play those games and give a portion of your earnings to someone who's rented it to you. So that's a clear utility that has inherent value to it. If you think about NFTs that you're going to be using within, a metaverse space where you own a skin or an outfit or something that you can port between different games, I think there's a utility in that. And I'm really loving seeing physical and virtual going back and forth, where you're buying an NFT and maybe you've collected enough of it and then you want to trade it and you get a ticket for something, or a pair of cool shoes that are, you can wear. And that kind of interoperability between virtual and real, I think, has a tremendous amount of utility that's barely even scratched the surface.
Thank you. Colburn, from a collector standpoint, you made a decision when you started the museum to have a permanent collection of artworks that you have collected pretty early on that will never be sold. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and like how that came about?
Yeah, I think first and fundamentally there was a recognition that in the very beginning, a lot of the collectors at the time were doing nothing with the artwork but sending it to cold storage. And we had kind of green grass and blue sky metaverse environments. It was freely create whatever you would want. Land was not particularly expensive or exclusive. And there was I guess, a desire to create the world that I wanted to see, which was one that was not hyper-commercialized, but one that was founded in empowering digital creators to help them both showcase their artworks and also to build metaverse spaces that highlighted and lift and spoke about their story, symbology, themes, whatever it is that they wanted to touch on. So that was kind of the, I guess, philosophical foundation of the museum. And then beyond that, kind of just cementing it outside of the market, making the narrative not about one buying, selling, flipping, this artist is the best, that's why we have them in the museum. No, it was about the breadth and depth of the, what I call crypto art movement, and how an open access network like Ethereum was reaching into those far corners of creativity, which previously that art had not been accessible by traditional means to individuals like myself. So beginning to see that and support people all over the world and their kind of like native expression.
And on this, which kind of leads me on to the next question, is through really the technological like innovation that is the blockchain and NFTs, collectors and artists have a direct transaction and also connection. And so, you know, as you were saying, when you collect a piece, usually you have an artist that can immediately chats to you and says, hey, thank you so much, you know, and you engage in a conversation. How do you think that has changed or is changing and shaping the way artists and collectors communicate, have a relationship, and just, you know, the space in general? Colburn, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I love that question, and I was thinking that a lot. Like, certainly in the beginning, it was all about the one-on-one relationship that you were having with the artwork and the artist, and kind of what that artist stood for in their vision and system and values, and that was kind of like what was driving certain people, what was driving certain artworks. But then it began to shift into communities and how communities were building value around IP. Obviously, classic case is Bored Ape Yacht Club. How are those 10,000 members rallying around that kind of like shared identifying IP? And it's obviously very powerful to see what a group can do to propel that forward. But for me, it's always still kind of about like that one-on-one priceless connection with the artwork and the artist and that person, and just like continuing to empower individuals in their sovereignty and their artwork.
I mean, I think it's like one of the first time in history where like a lot of the artists are actually alive and you can have a conversation with them and you can talk about the art, right? So it's kind of a meaningful moment.
Yeah, and also there's no middleman, right? So there's no like agent or a museum that the collector has to go through to find the artist. And from the artist side, well, I guess from both sides, you're talking to a normal person on Twitter. Like, you don't have to do this whole thing of like, oh, they're this, you know, put him on a pedestal. I think the NFT community has done a really good job at being extremely open and not really, and inviting everyone to participate, and that each voice is important in their own way, and no one is better than the other. So I think that kind of humanity and vulnerability about the community and the space allows for better conversations, more real conversations, rather than just focusing on the prestige and just like the whole traditional art world where everything was more, you know, you have a brand that you have to protect and you have to pretend to be this person. And here it's the opposite. Like, the more real you are and the more open you are, the better you do. So that's definitely a different dynamic.
Lauren, any thoughts on like traditional art versus like NFT art? Like maybe even, what do you think about the no gatekeeping, which
I mean, I think we say that there's no gatekeeping, but there still is gatekeeping, right? And gatekeeping is done by everything from, the platform that you're buying the art from, that's taking a percentage of that, to sort of the gatekeeping of traditional art sellers like Sotheby's and Christie's wanting to take on the role of still representing what they consider to be bigger artists that are also NFT artists. So there is a little bit of gatekeeping that still happens, for good or for bad. And I think there's also gatekeeping even within the artists who are accessible, because there's the gatekeeping of like the whitelist, right? There's the gatekeeping of, you can have this one, but you can't have that one. And then there's the gatekeeping of like the reveals, Are they really revealing the NFT that you bought? And did you really get the one that has that rarity because it was a generated thing that was randomized, or did you get that one because you knew the artist? So I don't know. I'm kind of in flux on the gatekeeping part. Do I think it's super important to have a relationship, if you want to, with the artist that you're buying an NFT from? Of course. I mean, I think that's the most fun of it all. Otherwise, there's sort of a detachment in buying something you don't even know where it came from. But your point about the artist being alive today is a really lovely one, because you go into a museum and most of the art in there is from someone who's no longer able to tell you why they painted that and the story behind it, and where they were when it happened, or what they wanted to share with you when that art was created. So now there's a different mode of connectivity that's helpful, but I certainly think that there is gatekeepers in the middle still, just different ones.
And kind of touching and going back to some of the early days, let's say, of like collecting, a lot of the artworks and a lot of the artists that you all collectively have in your collection have now become somewhat, let's say, famous in the NFT space. But obviously, like when you started collecting, these people were no one, let's say, and not a lot of people would know about them. So I want to take it back to those meaningful moments, and maybe talk about one particular piece or a particular artist that you specifically connected with and why.
There's one, so I am really a big fan of an animator called DK. He goes by DK Motion on Twitter if you want to find him. And I got one of his pieces back when it was like 3 ETH. And we immediately started talking, and we kind of just started learning together because we were both like towards the beginning of this whole thing. And he was telling me that he was getting a lot of hate from the traditional artist community, where they were still kind of hesitant about the whole crypto art, and they have, there was kind of like a divide, and we connected in that, and I was able to provide some support and also just continuing to learn about the space together. So that was really a really cool experience, because we were both new and we were going through a similar path, just kind of slightly different perspectives, but still it's the same material that you have to learn. And later on, he did a super steady growth, and recently one of his pieces went for over 200 ETH. So that went from 4 ETH to over 200 ETH in less than a year. And for me to be to have known him when he just started and he was telling me about his struggles, and now to see him on Times Square and trying to explain it to his family while it's happening and how he has all this money now, it's fascinating, and it's an experience that it's so unique, and for me to watch someone have that growth in such a short amount of time it makes me extremely happy, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I do what I do. So it's definitely been there's been a lot of experiences like that where I see someone that started from nothing. We were both learning, and now they're just like killing it.
Colby?
Oh, goodness. It's, I have a very visual memory, and I go back and I look at the collection, and just like that song you hear from your past, it just immediately brings you back into that moment. So just in looking at the collection, I can run like through myself a timeline of who I was, what I was thinking, why I was doing this. So there isn't one that like really speaks to me, but they all really speak to me, and it makes it incredibly personal and therapeutic and reflective. So the collection is really kind of like looking into a self-introspective mirror. And it was certainly a path that I used to kind of like, I guess, change myself to become this person that I am today. So yeah, I don't know, fall down the rabbit hole and see what happens.
Mine isn't a specific artist. Mine is actually a metaverse platform that hasn't been revealed yet. And it's totally mind-blowing to me how they were able to do it, but it's now a team of about 500 people that are all very much under NDA, building a new metaverse platform, and they're all artists, and they're all incredible. And it's led by a gentleman named Leslie Benzies, who created Grand Theft Auto, so I'd say he's wildly talented in the space to be able to do things that are going to become entire metaverse worlds with NFTs underneath them. So that is the one that brings me the greatest amount of joy, because I can see just endless opportunities with what he's built. Yeah, that's the one.
Switching gears a little bit and talking about maybe some myth busting, but speculation and investment. Like, these are, as I said before, words that are very common in the NFT space, but in general in traditional art space too. So what is true and what is not maybe so true about collecting art NFTs and the word speculation? I'll open it up to whoever wants to
I'd say
start
if you
this.
don't like it, if you don't like it, don't buy it, right? It's just the same as going to a casino, right? If you're not willing to lose your money, don't go gamble.
Yeah.
That's my personal thinking on it, speculation-wise, in terms of everybody speculating on is it going to crash or not.
And that happens in the crypto world and then the traditional investments. And there's always an amount of speculation. And like you said, you shouldn't use your bread money to bid on these things. I think there's always a certain amount of speculation, and I think the only difference that I've seen is that there's different factors that that affect that speculation. In the traditional art world, from just an outsider, I feel like the team behind the artists and the branding they are able to push is a big part of how they're able to get the value of that certain artist out, compared to the NFT artists that have a little bit more control over that. And there's still a brand to be made, but it's no longer a whole industry behind them that is literally placing them on a mainstream platform. They can kind of take that a little bit more control and kind of dictate the narrative a little more. So that's some factors that I've seen kind of change in the space.
Do you think that affects, the speculative side of it?
I think so. I think that you can tell when an artist has good intentions and is passionate about it and is actually there for the art, and they have a very distinctive art that they have discovered, and they completely dominate. And when you see that type of passion, typically those are the ones that you see that big growth. But again, don't don't bet on anything that you're not willing to lose, and don't buy anything that you don't like.
Look, this is not so difficult. Like we played 2017 together, and this is the same, right? Like you are, at the end of the day, you are investing in people. People that come early are people that have ideas, values, and visions that attracted them to the space when there was no money. If there was no money at that time and there's no money later, they will generally continue because they believe in those ideas. And like the best people generally start early, the best projects start early. They will outlast everybody in the long run. Ideas become derivative and copied, and teams just take roadmaps and replace them. But Bitcoin is Bitcoin for a reason, and Ethereum is Ethereum for a reason, and there's CryptoPunks for a reason, because those are like core foundational elements that are surviving time, they are accruing value, and the same can be said of one-of-one artists or communities or whatever NFT project or token you are buying.
Do you think there's a difference between collecting art and collecting collectibles, i.e. CryptoPunks?
Of course.
What is the difference?
What is the difference? Art is inherently personal, and collectibles are more community-oriented. So art is about your connection to an artwork and why you love it, and like you can explain it, but it might not make sense or be valuable to anybody else. But there is something about like X copy's work, for example, that is clearly striking a chord of the moment in time, in its aesthetic, in its subject matter, has universal appeal, and people are ascribing value to.
Lauren, do you have any thoughts on collectibles versus one-of-ones?
I think there's a lot of people buying because they're afraid of missing out, so there's a little bit of that. I do agree with Colby, though, that art, to me, I think is inherently more personal. It's probably because I think of art as sort of being more of a one-of-one as opposed to these massive collections that come out that are more generative art experiences that are more community.
I think one-on-one art, there's no like utility. When people talk about utility, that's like one of the big things that I think collectors shouldn't expect to have utility out of one-on-one art. Versus when you go into these collectibles, there's actually different verticals within the collectibles. There's collectibles that are meme projects that have literally no utility, but they're worth millions of dollars. And then there's the ones that have the amazing community, and they build experiences around those characters that are the collectibles. And then there's ones that are collectibles and create something out of it, like a comic series or a game based with those things, and then they give different rewards to the owners of that collectible. So I think it's not one-of-one versus collectible, because there's so many different verticals even within collectibles. So it's kind of hard to put all of them in just one bucket, because a lot of times different collections of collectibles have different purposes. So you need to figure out what that purpose of that collection is and figure out if that resonates with you or that's something that even interests you before you go and buy into the project.
And by the way, with NFTs that are supposed to have utility to them, there's often, there's only a limited amount of time that you have in life, and you're buying these things that you're required to sort of join the Discord, follow in this, do this step, do that step, play that game, stake this thing, and all of a sudden you're like, I can't keep up, right? There's just no possible way you could do it, whereas with traditional art, it's there. It's that moment in time. You can enjoy it. You can be as passive or as active as you'd like to be with it, where I think NFTs with utility, there's almost this demand that you have to sort of
It's exactly that for me. It's about expectation, right? If you are expecting something from somebody, if you are expecting a coin or a game and they don't deliver and they don't produce and it's affecting value, like, it's just ridiculous and it's mind-numbing to try and keep up with every single thing. So frankly, the art is, for me, really the bedrock. It was obviously what led NFTs into the mainstream, and I think is once all of this madness dies and teams get tired of dropping free stuff to everybody, just creating value out of nothing, it doesn't really exist. It will, the pendulum will swing.
And I guess there's also like a definition of who is a collector or what is an art collector kind of changing as well, right? Like we're talking about, collecting collectibles, for example. We're talking about collecting one-on-one art. We're talking about collecting editions, different types. And we're also looking at a younger generation that is actually collecting even art. I personally find that there's sometimes like the transition between people that have made maybe quite a bit of money actually trading collectibles or trading crypto, and are part of like a younger generation, my generation, our generation, and then go into buying art, and then they become acquainted with the idea of collecting art. So how do you think the definition of who is an art collector and what is an art collector is changing?
I love that question because I'm a prime example of what a collector should look like. I think maybe before, a collector was someone that was wealthy and that was well connected, and that's how they knew about it and purchased it. And now I think cryptocurrency has allowed the people that don't have generational wealth to have upward economic mobility, and also with the art not being attached to being shown in a fancy museum or somewhere in particular, where you can actually collect art from your home and see works from anywhere in the world. It just opens the possibilities on what a collector looks like. And for that reason that is the prime reason why I'm sitting here, because of that opportunity that cryptocurrency has allowed for so many people, and then the openness of being able to reach art from all over the world, which is the click of a button.
Lauren? Oh, go ahead, go for it.
I'm chomping at the bit, yeah, because something you said is super, super important. And for me, it's upward mobility in life is generally based on ideas of ownership, right? And there are so few opportunities for generally anybody out there in the world to actually own something without being in debt. And I think like access to ownership and access to a community and the ability to work together is something that you really don't find outside of this environment. So teaching people also about, I love NFTs as a Trojan horse for cryptocurrency adoption because I believe crypto is better money than fiat. And I love, so all of these things are at play, and it doesn't particularly matter to me where anybody begins to access the idea of what type of collector they are, as long as they feel ownership and are empowered by that ownership.
So I'm kind of enjoying watching traditional art collectors get a little pissed off because they don't understand NFTs. In the same way that probably traditional finance guys didn't understand cryptocurrency. And first they get super pissed off, and then they're like, maybe I should start my own collection. And then they start asking for some advice, and then they're like, I'm all in. And I also see the other side of it, where it's sort of, the originators of NFT space and collecting the NFT space, now have or had a significant amount of wealth as a result of it, and now they're really curious about, well, maybe I should go buy traditional art and see what that looks like. And so you're watching these little fun worlds collide. We see that in gaming where, gamers who traditionally just made a typical game are like, how do I do play to earn? Or how do I adapt a blockchain element of it? Or maybe we should have a token. In the same way that, guys who are doing play to earn are like, maybe we should make a traditional game. So there's this awesome, little dance that's happening between both sides to the point where there won't be that question, hopefully, anymore, because the whole thing will be woven together, over time.
Absolutely, I agree.
One
last
more
question.
thing. Look at things like Masterworks as an example, or Particle. I think where they're taking traditional art and they're fractionalizing it, and you're buying it as an NFT. Like, cool example of how to take those two worlds and do a mashup.
And one last thing I wanted to add is sometimes people are like, oh, I'm not really a collector. I mean, not like you. I'm not like a collector. And I'm like, no. Like, if you own a piece, even if it was worth 100, like 0.001 ETH, you're still a collector. Everyone starts, like that. So I think that's another beauty of it, that people that might have never thought that they could call themselves a collector are now very much so one. So that's really cool to see too.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that you touched on this, because one thing that I sometimes get when people talk about collecting NFTs and art NFTs or in general, it's like accessibility. And I feel like maybe we're at a point now where it's not as accessible as it was, or people just don't know where, to go. Like the discovery factor of, how to actually discover art or artists is kind of hard. Like the platforms don't really make it that easy for you. And so maybe like just to close it off from each of you, one or two like tips or just in general like thoughts on this and how to access the NFT world as a collector, as somebody who's interested.
I think that you have to have a clear understanding on what it's important to you. So there's many collections that have different utilities. For example, there's ones that part of their profits go towards education for women. So if you're someone that in the traditional world is someone that fights for that and you believe that that's your cause, then go and support that project, because it's, a natural extension. And even if you lose money, you will believe that's still your cause, right? So it's a little bit more personal. So I would encourage people to know what your interests are, and then don't fall into the FOMO of like, I just need to buy something. Like, I don't care what it is, I just need to buy something. I don't really like that rush that people get. I would encourage anyone to actually do research into the different projects that are out there, see who the people behind it are, hear them talk. There's so many Twitter spaces happening every single day. Join something, find out what connects to you, and then if that aligns and you are ready to put money that you're willing to put out there, then do it. So that's kind of what I believe on as far as like where to start.
Lauren?
I think just by making a choice, you're a collector, right? I like that piece, I'm gonna buy it. Or that one didn't really sit well with me, I don't like it. Or I bought it and now I don't really like the artist, so I'm gonna sell it. So that in and of itself makes you a collector. In terms of sort of where to go to do these things, I mean, I don't know, I figure follow the fun. As long as you're having fun with the people you're talking to and the websites you're looking at and the art you're seeing and the things you're listening to, just follow that road. It's not as overly complicated as it needs to be. There's no right or wrong way to do this. There's no one space to go to that has the definitive voice of reason in the NFT or blockchain or crypto world. Just have fun, and then at least at the end of the day, if you feel like you fucked up, at least you had fun doing it.
Yeah. And I want to add real quickly, like, it's not just art. You don't only have to collect art. You can collect wearables on a gaming platform. You can collect animals. You can connect trading cards for sports. Like, there's so many different things that you can do as a collector, not only in art. So if you have like a passion for a subject outside of art and you're like not really interested in that, there's so many other use cases for NFTs that you can also explore.
What was I going to say? The worst place to start is going to a marketplace, right? Because art attached to a dollar sign always looks expensive. And so what I do is we have, in the museum, we have something called the community collection. Anybody can become a member and add up to 100 pieces of their collection to our community collection. There are about 6,000 pieces in it currently. And yes, like by nature, it's a lot of garbage. But 10% is not. And when you are attracted to an image, you can click on it, you can look at it, and you can go to OpenSea from there and begin to understand who the artist is and see who that person is and figure out if you like that style and what they're doing. And then at the very end, figure out if it's affordable to you. If it's not affordable to you, then reach out to the artist and tell them you love their work. Artists, believe it or not, are incredibly compassionate people who want people who love their work to have their work. So it should not be transactional. This is not a transactional place. This is about fostering and building connection, discussing artwork, and discussing why these things are important to you as a viewer and to them as a creator.
Cool. So I think we have three things. One is find something that is meaningful to you. Two, have fun. And three, find connection and go with that. On this note, thank you so much to all three of the panelists.
Thank you.